there's a lot of different charges. There is gang charges, there's drug charges, there's gun charges, but really it's focusing on the murder. So why do you think they didn't do a murder trial as opposed to a RICO trial?
Well, God knows the last place I ever want to be is in Madam D.A. Fani Willis's head. But if you're going to put me there, I can only go by what the Prosecuting Attorney Council of Georgia says on their website and in their presentations to other prosecutors, which is that if you bring a RICO indictment, you're allowed to tell, quote unquote, the whole story. So I'm assuming they brought a RICO charge and a RICO count because they were allowed to bring everything in that they wanted to. A lot of the rules of evidence go out the window if you've got a RICO charge in there. Also, Fani Willis had been very successful, I guess she would argue successful, in a RICO trial against the public school attorneys in Atlanta just a few years earlier. So probably having seen some success there, she wanted to use RICO again with all of these guys.
Okay. Now, everyone gets arrested and nobody's given bond. Did that surprise you? Did that surprise you at all?
Well, it surprised me in the sense that if the judge is following the law of Georgia, what are called the Ayala factors, a lot of these guys should have gotten bond. So yeah, it surprised me that, at least in my view, the judge was not sticking to those Ayala factors and giving these people bond who really should have gotten bond.
Okay, so after everyone else gets arrested, Gunna actually turns himself in.
Right.
And he's charged with a RICO as well. Did that surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise. Look, in Georgia, almost anything can get you charged with RICO conspiracy the way the law is written. It is incredibly broad. So was I surprised that she used this tool against everybody that she possibly could? No, I wasn't surprised by that at all. Were they guilty of RICO conspiracy? No, they're not guilty of RICO conspiracy.
Well, yeah, out of every one of the trials, it seemed like Gunna was really not really part of it. He seemed like the least involved in anything that could potentially be criminal. Like, he was just an artist that happened to be there every so often. So he gets locked up, and then he essentially is the first one to plead out.
Yeah, he pleads out very early. If he's the first one, I can't recall, but he pleads out it may be the first, very early in the case.
Exactly. There may have been a couple other people,
maybe,
but he was by far the biggest high-profile person to actually plead out. And he entered an Alford plea deal.
Yes.
Now, this is a little complicated because you're not really admitting guilt, but you're accepting the charges. Explain what that is.
I promise it's really not that complicated. It's a way of pleading guilty essentially without accepting responsibility, where you say, look, I don't believe I'm guilty of this stuff, but I believe if it were to go to a jury, the state could probably put on a case where I might end up getting convicted. So it's in my interest to go ahead and plead guilty. And that's all it is.
Well, he pleads guilty and he stands in front of the judge, and the judge asked him, is YSL a gang as well as a record label? He says, yes, ma'am. And have you seen YSL members engage in activities in furtherance of the gang? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now, from what I understand, everyone else who took this plea had a very similar set of questions, but his was actually videotaped and released to the internet.
Well, let me speak freely on that, and I pretty much speak freely on everything. First of all, I want to clarify something, and I won't correct you very often, but when it's important, I will. In this case, it wasn't the judge reading those questions. It was the DA's office reading those questions. And it's the DA's office that puts those together. And as you say, a very similar set of questions. And if you want to walk out of jail, if you want to walk out of Rice Street and not spend Christmas there, and what turned out to be the next 2+ years of your life there, you better say yes to those questions, no matter what they are. So yeah, he said yes to those questions because what choice did he have? So that's basically what happened there. Now, why is there a camera in the room? I have to tell you, we're all down in courtroom 1C on the first floor, because that's the one that's big enough to accommodate all of us. Judge Glanville's normal courtroom is up in, I believe, 7F or 8F. He's up on the 7th or 8th floor. And the pleas would take place up there. And what happened would be people would just kind of disappear. They're just not there, or court would be delayed and we would not know why. So we didn't know this was happening. None of us, none of the other defense attorneys knew. Somehow a reporter knew. I believe it was Mark Winnie, who seems to have a relationship with the DA's office. So the DA tips him off. He somehow gets whatever authority that he needs, because I don't believe he would break the law in any way. So he somehow gets what we call a Rule 22 down here, I guess, gets a courtroom in there and records it. All of which I think is very shady, not on the reporter's behalf, he's doing his job, but just the whole way that was done was very shady.
Well, in the hip hop world, there was a lot of controversy over this video. Some people felt it was snitching. Gunna's lawyer was in contact with me during this time, and he made multiple phone calls directly to me and kind of explained how everything he said can't be used against anyone in a courtroom, because even if he repeated what he said in a courtroom, there could be a federal superseding indictment and that could be used against him. So therefore, it precluded him from actually taking the stand. What is your take on this?
Well, I can just tell you what happened factually, which is that he never did take the stand. I could be wrong on this because it's been a long trial, but I don't believe he was even on their witness list. I could be wrong. He may have been on the list, but he didn't take the stand. So unlike a lot of the other folks that took pleas, he wasn't called to the stand. He wasn't asked questions about YSL being a gang. So I believe that his lawyer got him a pretty good deal. He said what he had to say in order to walk out of Rice Street. And I mean, God forbid I'm ever in those shoes where I'm stuck in Rice Street and I'm going to have to say what the prosecutor wants to say to get out of there. So I totally understand what Gunna did. I don't like the term snitch. I don't like to use that term, but I don't believe he's a snitch. He said what he had to say. He parroted what the prosecutor gave him to parrot. And by the way, later in this trial, and you may get to this, you saw other people get tripped up because of that. But that didn't happen to him. He had a very good lawyer who did a great job for him.